When did the autistic kid in school show you a secret? I was the new kid at middle school, and that's when I noticed Gene sitting by himself at the end table making weird hand movements while staring at his sandwich. He had thick glasses and wore the same Harry Potter shirt I'd seen him in during first period. I sat down across from him and said hi. He looked up at me and whispered, "Constant vigilance," before going back to his sandwich. I thought maybe he was joking, so I laughed, but he stayed serious. Then he pointed at my backpack and said, "That's a nice niffler you've got there." My backpack was just plain black with no decorations. I had no idea what was happening. Over the next few days, I kept sitting with Gene because nobody else would. He only spoke in Harry Potter references and weird codes. When the bell rang, he'd say, "The chamber has been opened." When he needed the bathroom, he'd announce, "I must visit the ministry." At first, I thought he was just obsessed with the books, but then I noticed teachers rolling their eyes whenever he talked. Things got weird when I saw Mr. Peterson, the math teacher, mock Gene during class. Gene had raised his hand and said, "Professor, I've discovered the answer to the riddle." Mr. Peterson mimicked his voice and said, "Well, why don't you discover how to talk normal first?" The whole class laughed except me. Gene just put his head down and stopped participating. I started paying more attention after that. Mrs. Garcia, the English teacher, would ignore Gene completely, even when his hand was the only one up. She'd say things like, "Anyone else besides Harry Potter boy?" When Gene tried to answer anyway, she'd talk over him. During PE, Coach Williams made Gene run extra laps because he said Quidditch isn't a real sport when asked what his favorite game was. The worst was Ms. Lutz, the science teacher. She'd actually take points off Gene's tests for using made-up words, even though his answers were correct. I saw one where he'd written about dragon biology as a comparison for reptiles, and she'd marked the whole answer wrong. He was failing her class even though he knew more about science than anyone. I tried talking to Gene about it, but he just said, "The Dark Lord has many followers here." That's when I realized his code wasn't random. He was trying to tell people what was happening, but nobody would listen. The chamber being opened meant danger was coming. The ministry visits were him escaping to the bathroom to cry. Every reference meant something real. One day I found Gene in the library writing in a notebook. When he saw me, he quickly closed it, but I'd seen enough. He'd been documenting everything the teachers did with dates and times. He'd written Umbridge next to Ms. Lutz's name and Death Eater next to Mr. Peterson. It was his way of processing what was happening to him. I asked him directly if the teachers were bullying him. He looked around nervously, then whispered, "The prophecy speaks of a chosen one who will help defeat them." I realized he meant me. I was literally the only person who'd bothered to understand his language. He needed an ally and was asking for help the only way he knew how. We came up with a plan using his code. Operation Dumbledore's Army would expose what the teachers were doing. I started recording them on my phone whenever they mocked Gene. I saved every unfairly graded test and documented every ignored hand raise. Gene kept detailed notes in Harry Potter code that I learned to translate. The first victory came when I showed the recordings to my parents. They were horrified and immediately called the principal. Mr. Peterson got suspended pending investigation. Mrs. Garcia had to apologize publicly, but Ms. Lutz doubled down and made things worse for Gene. She started giving him detention for disrupting class with nonsense whenever he spoke. That's when we went bigger. I helped Gene write a letter to the school board translating his Harry Potter code into formal complaints. We attached all our evidence, including the recording of Ms. Lutz calling him a retarded wizard wannabe when she thought no one was listening. We sent copies to the local news station too. Gene signed it, "The boy who lived through your discrimination." The story exploded. Parents were outraged that teachers were bullying a disabled student. The school board launched a full investigation. Ms. Lutz was fired and lost her teaching license. The other teachers had to take sensitivity training. Gene got moved to honors classes with teachers who actually appreciated his unique way of communicating. By the end of the year, Gene and I were best friends. He still spoke in Harry Potter references, but now people tried to understand instead of mock him. He added new codes from other books too, like Percy Jackson and Lord of the Rings. On the last day of school, he gave me a handmade card that said, "You're my real Patronus."